My dear, I've been silent, holding my heart back, but now I see you, the real you. You couldn't hear my soul's cry, but my silence speaks louder than words ever could. Every moment I hid my feelings was a piece of me breaking. Now, I can't hide anymore. I've been waiting, but now I realize, silence was my only answer to your absence. My heart didn't forget. It just learned to wait. But time can't hold back my love forever. Your absence taught me more than I wanted to know about silence, pain, and how to heal. Every quiet moment was a prayer to you, but you never heard the whispers I sent. I wasn't quiet out of fear, but out of love, holding back because I knew you weren't ready. The silence was never about distance. It was about giving you space to realize what you've lost. I've been silent, but you don't realize you've always had my heart, even in the quiet. It wasn't that I didn't care. It was that I didn't want to overwhelm you with what you couldn't handle. I wanted to speak, but my love for you was so deep, words felt too small to contain it. Every word unsaid is a chapter of our story that remains unfinished, like a book I'll never close. You didn't know, but my silence was my way of loving you when words couldn't do it justice. I kept quiet not because I didn't want to speak, but because I was waiting for you to listen. The quiet in my heart isn't a sign of absence. It's a testament to my love, waiting patiently. When you couldn't see me, I learned the beauty of silence, but it broke my heart each time. I stayed silent, hoping you'd realize how much I felt, but maybe I was only silencing my own pain. My silence wasn't emptiness. It was filled with the longing you couldn't hear. I spoke with my eyes, hoping you'd understand, but my silence became louder than any word I could say. I was quiet, not because I had nothing to say, but because nothing felt right until you understood. The longer I stayed quiet, the deeper my feelings grew, undisturbed but aching to be seen. I was silent, thinking you'd come closer, but now I see the silence was my own cage. My silence was my love's way of showing you that it would always wait, no matter the distance. If this touched your soul, don't scroll, like, comment your favorite quote, and subscribe for more. Every unspoken word has been a prayer for your heart, but your silence became my answer. You never heard the echoes of my heart, but I kept loving you, quietly in every silence. It was never about hiding. It was about protecting you from the weight of my heart's truth. My silence was my surrender, hoping you'd hear me without ever speaking. I was quiet because I didn't want to burden you, but now I realize, silence has its own cost. The quiet was never meant to hurt you. It was me hoping you'd see the truth without words. I didn't speak because I thought my love would be too much for you, but now I see, silence was too much. You couldn't hear my heart breaking because I kept the pieces hidden in silence. I waited in silence, thinking you'd come back to me, but now I see, I was waiting for myself. My silence wasn't absence. It was my way of holding you in a space only love could fill. The quiet between us isn't distance. It's just the space where love has nowhere to go. I stayed silent, thinking you'd understand. Now I know. Sometimes silence is louder than any word. You thought I was quiet out of fear. I was quiet because I loved you more than I could say. Silence was the only love language I had when you couldn't hear the cries of my heart. I didn't speak, not because I didn't care, but because I was too afraid to show how deeply I did. Sometimes silence isn't avoidance. It's the deepest form of communication when words fail. My silence doesn't mean I don't love you. It means I'm letting you find your way to me. In my silence, my heart spoke the loudest. I loved you even when I couldn't say it. I was quiet because you were too far away to hear me, but I was still here, always. The silence I gave you was the most sacred gift I could offer. The space for you to grow. You couldn't hear the words I wanted to say, but my silence was the truest expression of my soul. Every moment of quiet between us was a reflection of the love I was too afraid to show. I stayed silent, hoping you'd read the unspoken words in my eyes. But you never looked. I spoke in silence, hoping you'd feel the truth in my heart without needing me to say a thing. In my quiet, I waited for you to understand what was too big for words. Silence was my answer to your question. It was my love, unspoken but felt in every moment. I loved you too much to speak, because I feared the words would ruin the quiet peace we shared. The quiet between us is louder than any words. It's the sound of hearts waiting to speak. I didn't speak, not because I didn't want to, but because the silence was the only space left for me. Every silent second I spent away from you was my heart aching, hoping you'd finally hear. I stayed silent, thinking I'd protect you from my pain, but now I realize I was just protecting myself. I was quiet because I thought you needed space, but now I see, I needed it just as much. My silence isn't empty. It's a sacred space for the love I'm too afraid to speak. Every quiet moment is filled with the words I couldn't say. You're always on my mind. I stayed silent, hoping you'd hear the unspoken truths, but now I realize, I was the one who needed to speak. In silence, I found peace. But it was a peace filled with longing for something that never came. You couldn't hear my words, so I let silence speak the truth I couldn't say aloud. I stayed quiet, not out of fear, but out of love. Hoping one day, you'd understand. Sometimes, silence is not avoidance. It's my soul's way of letting you feel me without any words. The quiet isn't cold. It's the warmth of a love that's still here, waiting in the silence. Silence held my feelings, waiting for the moment when you would finally understand them. I stayed silent, not because I didn't care, but because I needed you to come to me. Silence is never nothing. It's everything I wanted to say but couldn't. The quiet was never empty. It was filled with love that couldn't be spoken, only felt. I stayed silent, not out of anger, but because I feared my words would push you further away.